Okay, so now what we're going to turn our attention to is rather than thinking about quotas as we've done for the rest of this section, sorry, for the beginning of this section, we're now going to think about export subsidies that foreign puts on its production. So what this is going to do is that if there's a world price, say, of PW, it's going to raise the effective price that foreign producers are going to export at by PW plus some subsidy S. However, unlike just a regular production subsidy that home places before, this is also going to impact the price at which foreign consumers are now going to be able to consume at. And the reason is that foreign is a net exporter, and so foreign is not going to be able to import the good that it is effectively subsidized. So the subsidy is going to raise prices in foreign for both foreign exporters and for foreign consumers. Usually, why would you think about doing this? Usually sort of foreign or sort of we see countries tend to do this if they want to sort of boost sort of their there's sort of this usually the argument that most countries have is sort of this infant industry where they feel like they need to use sort of industrial policy to help bump up the competitiveness of their firms, under the expectation that that later on, if once their firms achieve some economies of scale, then they'll sort of be able to more effectively compete in the market. Another reason why this might happen is sort of, tends to be the perspective that sort of countries take on some of these export subsidies, is that sometimes countries will impose these export subsidies sort of potentially of the policy of pushing other countries out of the market and sort of pushing their firms, causing other countries' firms to exit. And then they do so with the strategy of then, foreign firms might be doing this potentially to push other firms out of the market. And then once those other firms are out of the market, they remove subsidies because now they've lessened the competition abroad. So, this is just a little bit of insight into why, why countries might choose to apply export subsidies from potentially different perspectives. So let's think about using a graphical analysis to show the welfare effects of those subsidies on both foreign and home. Okay, so let's clear this. So let's start out with a couple of things. So I know this graph seems intimidating, but let's just break it down into a couple parts. So first, let's think about when we're in free trade. That is when the world price is just PW. Okay. So what is foreign going to do? Well, now foreign, you can see that we're in the sort of upper part of the demand and supply graph rather than the lower part that we were in before. And the reason for that is that we're now thinking that foreign is a net exporter. So, so the difference between foreign's demand and foreign supply is going to be exports. Returning our attention to the home market, again, this same quantity here is going to be imports. And recall that we have the imports equals exports, and so of course those two must be the same. In graph 3, what we've drawn is we've drawn foreign's export supply. So this here is foreign export supply, so FES for short, and this is home's import demand, or HID for short. Okay, and so you can see that if you graph, taking sort of the equations that we had for home's import demand and foreign's export supply that we had, say from section 10, you can see that foreign's export supply is upward sloping in the price, home's import demand is downward sloping in the price. All of this makes fairly standard economic sense. So we see that what is the intersection of home's import demand and foreign's export supply? Well, that's going to pin down the world price. And then it's also going to determine the amount of exports, or conversely, the amount of imports that we have in the world. And so this intersection of foreign import demand and foreign export supply and home import demand, remember that that's the equation that we use to figure out what what was going to be the new equilibrium world price and what was going to pin down the amount of imports and exports. And so again, this is just a graphical representation of the equilibrium condition that we used previously. Okay, so now let's think about what the impact is going to be of foreign's export subsidy on the world market. So note that what this is implying is that if foreign is exporting any given number of units, say if foreign chooses to export this number of units here, they won't, but just take this as just sort of a motivating example. Then now, if foreign was willing to export this number of units at this price, then it's now willing to export the same number of units at S units lower. And that's because the subsidy is S. And so this ships foreign's export supply down by S units. Of course, if home's import demand was perfectly inelastic, this would mean that the world price, or in other words, home's import demand was perfectly vertical. This would mean that the price would fall, world price would fall by exactly S. But of course, home's import demand isn't perfectly inelastic. There's some elasticity to it, and so some of the price, the sort of lowered price, some of the lowered price is reflected in the fact that home now has more effective demand for foreign's exports, and so the price doesn't decrease fully by the amount of the subsidy S. But the new world price is again pinned down by the equilibrium of foreign's new export supply curve and home's new import demand curve. And so that pins down the number of exports. Now the new number of exports is X2. That's also the same as home's imports. And it also pins down the new world price, which I'm going to call PW tilde. So that's what this price is right here. Okay, so now let's analyze what's going to happen now. Well, now at this lower world price, you can see that home is going to import more. And we'll see it, but foreign is also going to export more. And so notice that the new world price is PW tilde. And so this is the new world price. And why is the new price lower? It's because foreign has increased the effective supply of exports, decreasing the world price of the good. And all of this is coming about because home is a large country, just like before. So so now the world price has decreased to PW prime, but because foreign is paying a subsidy S, this is going to increase the effective price that its producers can sell at to P star tilde. But because domestic producers can't import from home, recall that foreign is the exporter here. Domestic consumers must also purchase at this same price, and so that's going to reduce the amount that domestic consumers and foreign are able to consume. The new amount of exports now is given by the difference in demand and supply at the new subsidized price in foreign, and so that's the total number of exports. And notice that of course, the government has to apply a subsidy of X to each unit of those exports. So the total amount that the government's going to spend on that subsidy is going to be given by that blue shaded area here. Okay, so now that we've gone through a little bit of the diagram, let's see what's going to happen to the areas of welfare for foreign's consumers, producers, and the government. So the first effect is that note that initially under world trade, foreign's consumers had a consumer surplus given by this blue shaded area. Now at a higher price, they have less consumer surplus. They just have consumer surplus given by here. So consumers have lost out on the areas of A and B. Next, let's think about producers. Well, producers Producers initially in foreign had producer surplus given by this area here. Now at a higher price, they gain this this area here, and so I just want to make clear before producer surplus in foreign also included this this area right here. I just want to be clear about that. So foreign producers have gained from the increased price, so they've gained the areas A, B, and C. Now the government has to subsidize each of the exports by an amount S, and so that means that they have to pay areas B, C, D, and E. So the government revenue that foreign has to spend is negative B, C, D, and E. So the net welfare gain for foreign is negative B, D, and E. Notice that that's negative regardless of what those areas look like. So we can say that the net welfare effect for foreign is negative. Now let's analyze the situation in home. Well, in home, initially under free trade, consumer surplus was given by this shaded area right here. Now, under the new subsidized effective world price, consumers have gained areas G and H. So consumers here in home gain G and H. What's lost? Well, what's lost is that producers used to produce this amount of producer surplus, but now producers now only have this amount of producer surplus. So we've lost for producers negative G. Government is not getting any revenue, so the net welfare gain here is H. So domestic consumers gain from the fact that foreign is now subsidizing its production.
It's been a while since I've been to the site, so
okay. And so if we add up all those areas, we get positive H and negative B, D, and E. But what can we notice? Well, we notice that that this area H, well, this is the area that home's gaining. But if we look on a diagram of home's import demand and foreign's export supply, we can see that the area under home's import demand curve, essentially the new consumer surplus for home is the same area as E prime here. So that's represented by this area right here in case it's unclear. So H is equivalent to E prime. But E prime is just is basically equal to this subsidy here. So recall that this subsidy, so this subsidy is what foreign is providing on each unit of its exports, but this area E here is just equal to, so recall this accrues to, this area here accrues to to foreign producers, but this area here is what's going, part of which is going to home's new surplus, minus the only part that's not going to home's new surplus is area F, and this is effectively deadweight loss here. So minus area F, this area E here is exactly equal to E prime, and so this is why E prime is equal to E minus F. Now, if we add up all these terms, it turns out that we have these E's cancel out, and what we get is negative B, negative D, and negative F, which regardless of those areas is negative. So we see that the world as a whole is going to lose, even if home is gaining. So what's the effect of production subsidy on the world level? It's negative, and this doesn't depend on the areas of B, D, and F.